Hello, fellow story lovers and history buffs. It's time for another titillating episode of the Chuchu Blema Sane African folk tales and history podcast with me, Buki, the avid storyteller. I'm happy to be able to share these stories with you and continue this beautiful art form that is oral storytelling. It is the most ancient way us humans have documented and passed down history and life lessons woven in stories through the experience of animated characters. Information vital for our communities were recited or put in songs and poetry and were often changed to suit the current situations of the people listening. The audience gets to feel the intimacy of a shared story and are part of the creativity of shaping the tale. The imagination gets to wander when it comes to stories of this nature, and that's my favorite part about it. You get to take your mind on a journey, and all the different interpretations and versions find their own place over time and make it a wonderful rabbit hole to go down, making a connection between the storyteller and the audience. Today's story is very popular and is Akan in origin, though I also saw some other interpretations from other sides of the continent. I saw a Yoruba one and I also saw a Ugandan one. The story of why the lizard nods his head. The original story is an Anansi story, which is it's a little it's a little misogynistic. Well, I'll talk about that one later on in the pod. As per usual, I've put my own spin on it and I've titled it Zard, the sharpest tongue in the land. Let's get into it. Deep in the lush greenery of Moasase lived a lizard with the most beautiful tongue in all the land. We'll call him Zard. He had a beautiful blue body with an orange tail and head. He was quite the catch, and in a society where having the most beautiful tongue was prioritized, Zard's tongue was the talk of the land. It was the right width, length, color, and it fit perfectly in his mouth. The only animal that had come close to contending was Agamama. All the animals agreed, and he would get compliments all day and night from creatures of all different breeds and creeds. The sharpest tongue in the land competition held every year was the biggest festival in the Moasase. That time of the year had come again, and the animals in the Moasase were busy with tongue grooming and maintenance. The tortoise, Tort, was in charge, and she took her job very seriously. She never lost or mixed up any tongues, and she stayed on her team to make sure they groomed and maintained the tongues with the utmost care. We cut to Zard and Nake, standing on his sunny spot on a rock, taking a break from preparing for the competition. They heard a creature scurrying upwards, and Zard smiled as he saw a brown and green spotted head poking up the hill. Agamama. Here to scope the competition? Nake hissed playfully. Oh no! I came to wish you luck, she said. She'd moved to Moasasa the year before, and she and Zard had become very close. I hear the dog intends to enter the competition this year, she said. The more the merrier, Nake hissed, very self assured. They chatted about the competition from the year before and how Zard had stolen the show with his death defying tongue flips. Nothing is stopping me from winning this year, Zard said. Except me, Agamama chimed in. They chatted some more and more went their separate ways to prepare for the competition. Zard practiced his routine one more time before falling asleep under the stars. The next day, he watched the animals from all over Moasase file in from his side of the rock that overlooked the land. He'd wait a little longer and then head down to the festivities. He shook off his growing nerves and lined up some ants for breakfast. We panned down to the competition grounds to animals of all different shapes and sizes. Herds, packs, broods, colonies, and crashes packed themselves onto the grounds. The kings, queens, and subjects of all the lands sat chatting amongst themselves. That Zard fellow will take it this year, the king of the amphibian kingdom quipped. He's one enough, the queen of the mammal kingdom said, cutting in. If the giraffe hadn't won last year, I would have started to suspect foul play. Kwe, nyenkemini? The queen of the bird kingdom asked, and they both laughed. A horn was blown to symbolize the beginning of the games, and everyone sat up eagerly or found themselves a vantage point to watch the show. The crowd had been drinking palm wine and were a very merry and supportive bunch. The judges, made up of tongue connoisseurs of all classifications, sat at the judges' table ready for the festivities to begin. The new entries always went first, and the dogs strutted in, putting on quite the display. Next was the beautiful hippopotamus, and then the chicken. Last year's winner, the giraffe, had opted out of the competition due to a neck injury that all the animals swore was made up. Agamama came to the center, and she was a crowd favorite. She beatboxed and used her tongue to play the bongos. All the kingdoms roared with applause. Animal after animal came, and the crowd went wild as it got better and better. Then it was time for Nake. He slithered to a flute played by the best flutist in the land. After a hissing display, he moved on to a self choreographed mating call. The female snakes swooned. The last spot was reserved for Zard, and he stepped up quickly. The amphibian kingdom chanted his name.
Zard! 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 Zard!
Zard raised his front leg to acknowledge his supporters. The crowd fell silent, and he began. He performed an intricate dance with his tongue, writhed it out of his mouth, changing it into different shapes of forest creatures in between dances. The whole kingdom applauded. Even the queen of the mammal kingdom stood up. He'd outdone himself again. It didn't take the judges long to come back with a verdict. They lifted Zard up high in the air as soon as his name was announced.
Zard has done it again!
The animals carried him to the river as it was customary to do after the competition. They all took their tongues out and jumped into the river to swim. Zard's win was celebrated with speeches of his greatness and the power of his tongue. The animals continued their celebration, and the river slowly started to empty as the sun set. And as it went down, Zard was the only animal left at the river. He got out of the water and went to the spot where he had left his tongue to put it back in his mouth. It was nowhere to be seen, and in its place lay a long, jumpy tongue. He tried to call out, but he couldn't talk. He put the imposter tongue in his mouth to raise the alarm about the theft. He couldn't get out any words. Every time he tried to talk, his head just bobbed up and down. News spread far and wide that Zard had lost his tongue. A search was made throughout the animal kingdoms to no avail. Many years and tongue quests later, almost everyone but Zard, Agamama, and Nake would forget he hadn't always had this long tongue in his mouth. He stopped participating in STITL and would stand on his sunny spot on the rock, watching the competition with a tongue he had come to loathe. The most common story is the Anansi version of why the lizard nods his head, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard this version. Here goes. In a town not very far from Anansi's home lived a great king. This king had three beautiful daughters whose names were kept a secret from everybody except their own family. One day, their father made a proclamation that his three daughters would be given as wives to any man who could find out their names. Like, the criteria. Anansi made his mind up to do so. He bought a large jar of honey and set off for the bathing place of the king's daughters. When he got there, he climbed on top of a tree which grew some very fine fruit. He picked some of the fruit and poured honey over it, and when he saw the princesses approaching, he dropped the fruit on the ground and waited. The girls thought the fruit had dropped on its own, and one of them ran forward to pick it up. When she tasted it, she called out her sister's name to tell her how sweet it was. He dropped another one, and the second princess picked it up, and she also in turn called out the names of the other two. And this is how he found out their names. As soon as the princesses had gone, Anansi came down from the tree and hurried into the town. He went to all the great men and summoned them to a meeting at the king's palace the next day. He then visited his friend the lizard to get him to act as a herald at the court the next day. He told the lizard the three names and told him that he was to sound them through his trumpet when the time came. Early the next morning, the king and his court were assembled as usual. All the great men of the town appeared, and Anansi stated his business, reminding the king of his promise to give his three daughters to the man who had found out their names. The king demanded to hear their names, and the lizard sounded them on his trumpet. The king and the courtiers were very surprised. His Majesty, however, being a stickler for the rules of chauvinism, said there was no way that he would give his daughters to anyone else but the man who had sounded their names on the trumpet, which was the lizard. Anansi was angry and explained that he told the names to the lizard, so he ought to get at least two of the girls. Like just haggling. The women, they were haggling the girls like they were like products. Anyway, while the lizard could have the third, the king refused. Anansi then begged hard for even one, but he was also refused that. He went home very angry, declaring that he would get his revenge on the lizard for stealing his wives away. First of all, Anansi, but let's continue the story. He thought over the matter very carefully but couldn't find a way to punish the lizard. At last, however, he had an idea. He went to the king and asked the king if he would ask his finest cock to crow in the morning for him because he had a journey to go on and he needed to be up very early. The king agreed. As soon as night fell, Anansi went back to the palace and went to the cock's sleeping place, seized the bird, and killed it. He then carried it to the lizard's house, then cooked it, placed the feathers under the lizard's bed, and put some of the flesh on a dish close to the lizard's hand. He then poured boiling hot water into the lizard's mouth, making him unable to speak. When morning came, Anansi went to the king and reproached him for not letting the cock crow. The king was surprised. What did I do? Why am I in it? He sent one of the servants to go and bring him the cock. But of course, the servant came back empty handed. The king then ordered them to find the thief. No trace of him could be found anywhere. Anansi cunningly then said to the king, I know the lizard is a rogue because he stole my three wives from me. Perhaps he is the thief. Accordingly, the men went to search the lizard's house. And of course, they found the cock there because Anansi had put it there. And they questioned the lizard, but the poor animal was unable to reply. He could only move his head up and down helplessly. They thought he was just refusing to speak, so they dragged him before the king. He still couldn't answer the king's questions because his tongue was gone, and this got the king very angry. The lizard was judged guilty of the theft, and as a punishment, his wives were taken away from him and given to Anansi. Since then, lizards have always had a way of moving their heads helplessly back and forth, as if to say, how can anyone be so foolish as to trust Anansi? I got this version from heritagehistory.com. As entertaining as the Anansi story is, it is also very misogynistic. And I think the saddest part about that is the fact that I can't even say, oh, yeah, but that was back then. We are still living with it today, to this very day. We need to change. We need to change. Okay, let's make a change. Another narration had the lizard as a wise problem solver in his village. He silently observes the villagers as they try to solve the problems of their grains being stolen by an unknown culprit. They try to catch it and find out it's a giant rat that is twice everyone's size. After wise musings on his sunny spot on a rock, he's able to figure out the giant rat was not their enemy and he just wanted to feed his family. The lizard becomes known as a wise one, and that is why he always nods his head because he is all knowing. A lot of the different versions had life lessons attached to them. One on not being late. That one had the lizard choking on a bone because he had gotten to the village party late and all that was left for him to eat was bones. And so it got stuck in his throat and then he had to like keep bobbing his head up and down to try and get it out. So it's like a lesson on not being late. And I will take that one. I will take that one quietly and put it inside my book. The Yoruba version has the tortoise and the lizard in a feud. The tortoise doesn't like the lizard, but he decides to throw a party and to tell the lizard to come in the evening and tell all the other animals to come in the morning. When the lizard arrives there in the evening, all that's left of the party is bones. He eats the bones because he had spent the whole day not eating anything, thinking that, Chale, if I get to this party, I'm going to spoil there. He eats the bone, it gets stuck in his throat, and forever he's nodding his head up and down, trying to get the bone out of his throat. There's an Igbo version that has the tortoise and the lizard as friends, and the lizard is in charge of the king's treasury. And the tortoise wants to get into the king's treasury and, you know, have a little something and take whatever it is that he wants in there. And so he gets the lizard drunk and he steals from the king, and the lizard is blamed. The moral of that one is that it's better to have a growing enemy than a smiling friend, and that one is the T, my people. That's the real T. That's a very important life lesson because community is important, but who it's made up of ensures its strength. And there's nothing worse than having a friend who you think loves you and cares about you, but they actually don't. They do everything to undercut you. They go behind your back. They try and make you feel small. It's the worst thing. It's important to have community, but community should be a safe place, not just a place where you not just I have to have community and I'm just gonna have community, and it's a little bit scary, right? Because you it feels like it's a bit scary when it feels like, okay, so then who do I trust? But you have got to lock in with your discernment because those little nudges that your brain gives you or those little red flags that come up that we always choose to ignore because we love a person, yeah, don't ignore them. Don't if it looks like a talks like a then it must be. So anyway, that was a very, I feel like life the tale of the lizard, the tale of the lizard in the many different narrations that I see is one that is mainly focused on telling you to just be very aware of the people that you call friend. And I agree 100%. I didn't change very much with my version. I just added the competition to make it a little more beefy because in the version that my grand aunt told me, the animals just went to the river to swim, and when they came out, they saw that the lizard's tongue was lost. So I added the competition just to make it a little bit beefier. And it was also nice to add the healthy friendship that Agamama, Zard, and Nate had. According to science, the lizard bobs its head to communicate for territorial displays, mating rituals, and as a response to their environment. They use it to send messages to other lizards to establish hierarchies and attract mates. I just find it notable that across all species, showing dominance is important. Like lizards are out here doing push ups, head bobs, and waves to show how fit of a lay they will be, or to say, don't come on my turf or we're going to have to tussle. It's kind of amusing and an interesting running theme. And the interconnectedness of all the species always stands out to me. And it still stopped Galamsey. There was a river in the story, and I've said that every time there's a river in the story, I will say stop Galamsey. We and almost every single story that I have heard has a river in it. And it shows that we as Africans, we have always respected and loved water. We have got to protect our water bodies. Stop Galamsey now. The first of the month saw the absolutely devastating Kantamanto fire that happened, where people lost their lives, their goods, their market stalls. And it was very, very, very disheartening and sad to see. But the traders are already building up the market, getting back to work. I think that's so commendable. It really is. I love Cantamanto so much. I've been going to Cantamanto ever since I was a teenager. And as a creative, there is nothing that you can't get done in Cantamanto. Like they make everything from scratch. They upcycle clothes. Like it's really sad that this happened to them. They did not deserve that. Nobody deserves that, but they really didn't deserve that. But I'm really happy to see that the market is getting back on its feet. And if you're looking to help the Cantamanto traders, one way you can do that is through the All Foundation. They have a Momo number +233 559852 625 and a donor box, cantamanto.theor.org. And any funds that you send to them will be given directly to the traders. There are other organizations you can go through, but I'm choosing to amplify the OR because they've been working with Cantamanto for a while now prior to the fire, and I've seen some of the work that they've done firsthand. We've come to the end of another episode of the Chuchu Blema Sane podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We will be bringing you episodes bi-weekly on Wednesdays. You can follow us on Instagram at tbsdaily_aft or email us at chuchublemasane@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any other versions of the stories you hear on here or just any thoughts you have. You can also send in your original short stories and they'll be featured on the pod. I'll be back on the 5th of February with the tale of the man who never lied. The origins of this tale are not very clear, it's just stated as an African tale, though I saw some references that trace it back to South Africa and Tanzania. If any of you know its true origins, you can let me know in the comments. The show is produced by Nikita Kowalski. The stories are collected, researched, written, and read by me. Show music by Andre Ayete, and the orator of today's story is my grand auntie, Bernice Omotayo Ward Brew. Thank you for listening. Until next time, tree blow. Take it easy. This has been the Chuchu Blema Sunny podcast, sharing truly African stories.